This is the Capital Dispatch Podcast. What's going on, everybody? On today's show, we are talking about moving down south and why it might not be as affordable as people may think. So why are we talking about this week, right? Well, according to a Capital Dispatch newsroom article, folks have actually been moving back up north after going down south because they're finding out that it's too expensive. And in one couple's case, they moved to Florida and were met with high home prices and insurance costs. Then adding insult to injury after storm damage, they had to come out of retirement to cover those costs. And their story is obviously pretty extreme and really sad, but honestly, it's not that unique because according to Seniorly, Florida is the 15th worst state to retire in for people who are on a budget. And still, people have been making that move down south.
Whether it's the breezy waters of South Florida beckoning, or the barbecue and lively music of Austin calling their name, Americans are increasingly picking up and planning roots in the South.
And obviously, it does make sense, right? Because things are expensive and expensive everywhere, honestly. So if you're making decisions based on affordability, it's often less about choice and more about necessity. But unfortunately, the South's conservative Republican take on the economy and on taxes is making the lives of middle-class people pretty crappy, right? Like take Texas, for example, a deep red state that is attractive due to low taxes. But according to CNBC, it ranks last in quality of life because of its poor health care that's highlighted by one of the lowest primary care provider to patient ratios in the country, with 182 primary care providers per 100,000 residents, according to the United Health Foundation. And this is a trend that you find in, Republican states in the South and in the Midwest, is you get the promise of low taxes, which in theory is dope, but basically everything else is kind of like, yeah, man, you're on your own with that. According to the Economic Policy Institute, or EPI, that independence extends to how the workforce is treated too. They reported that median earnings in 9 southern states are among the lowest in the nation, even after you adjust for the lower cost of living in the South. And it gets worse when you look at the impact on families, as the EPI reports that the child poverty rate in the South is basically 21%, higher than in any other region. 21% higher than any other region in the country. And then you've got people pouring in from other states thinking things are gonna be easier, and they may actually be making things worse. According to Business Insider, a surge in new residents has driven up expenses, including utilities, gas, and housing. And when you're jamming people into a region that lacks infrastructure, things may not be that much easier.
Poverty is cyclical, especially across large numbers of people. They have the worst economies, so they have the worst pay, so they have the least tax revenue, so they have the least money to fund schools and infrastructure.
And that's the thing about taxes that Republicans like to leave out when attempting to convince people that anything involved with taxes is bad, is that most people need the things that taxes pay for. So say you hamstring a state by getting rid of unemployment insurance, right? What happens when people lose their jobs? Do they just survive on all the money that they're saving on income tax and not having to pay taxes? Because I've seen egg prices recently and it's not feasible, and Republicans know it. Back to that Capital Dispatch story, it notes that relocating to the South is perfectly fine, but you kind of gotta have a lot of money, which if you're leaving one state because you can't afford it, you probably also can't afford to go somewhere else that might end up being just as expensive, because certain things that you were getting from the state you lived in, this new state that you moved to doesn't have. Back to CNBC, in Texas, the minimum wage, right, it's $7.25 an hour, which is about 20% lower than an hourly rate that would cover the cost of living for a family of 4, according to an Oxfam America report. And get this, if a Texan loses their job, the state's unemployment benefits cover 10.5% of the income needed to cover the cost of living. And you know what would increase that number? Paying some taxes. Taxes would. because taxes are an investment in a thing, right? Like, that's why it's often said that a budget is a reflection of your priorities. You put tax dollars towards something like paid family and medical leave because you care about workers and their families, not because you're trying to pull a fast one on people and take more of their money. Because if somebody gets hurt or they get sick and they don't have any time off or paid time off, they're gonna wish they lived somewhere that had a paid family and medical leave program, because we don't have a federal one and we're probably not gonna get that. That's why the EPI called Republican tax policies regressive and said that this approach to taxes simply means there's not sufficient revenue to properly fund education, healthcare, public transportation, water and sewer system maintenance, and many other public services Southerners rely on. And again, I'm telling you, I shouldn't even say that. I don't have a lot of money, so I get it. Things are expensive and paying taxes is annoying. But when you live in a society with other people, you're sharing resources with those people, whether you like it or not. So if you're in the middle class and you think you can live an independent, off-the-grid life where you only focus on you and you only pay for the things that you think you're gonna end up needing, you're playing yourself. Or somebody's playing you. And why do Republicans play this game? Well, let's go back to the EPI. And they said this thing goes all the way back to post-Civil War times, when after slavery was abolished, plantation owners represented themselves as concerned taxpayers who opposed rising property taxes. They were joined by poor white farmers who would now also be subject to rising property taxes raised by newly and temporarily empowered black political leaders. They continue. These leaders were raising taxes to provide basic services like public education and to rebuild the infrastructure after the devastation of the Civil War. But wealthy Southerners stoked racial animus to divide poor and working class Southerners along the lines of race and ensure majority support to implement highly regressive tax policies. And thus the concept of taxation to build and maintain crucial systems being deemed as just a handout for people that don't want to work hard was born. And that's where we are right now. So if you want to relocate down south, just make sure you do your research on whatever services here in Connecticut can help you better before you make the switch. And for real, do your research, because nothing's worse than having to move. So imagine having to move and then having to move back.
And Narcan saves lives.
This week at the Capitol, a Narcan training event was held in the Legislative Office Building.
We have a lot more work to do.
Narcan is a drug that can quickly reverse the effects of an opioid overdose. Kyle Zimmer of the Connecticut AFL-CIO's Health and Safety led the training session on Narcan.
If you put it in the left side, the next dose goes in the right side if it's not working, and go back and forth.
State Senator Saud Anwar says education is crucial in saving lives from overdose, but so is something he says that can be even more impactful.
But the overarching issue in this whole situation is a lack of empathy in our society, and having this mindset that if somebody is using the substances, it is their fault. It's like, no. It's a society that led to that point.
Oh, me again.
Ashlyn Lower of the Governor's Prevention Partnership led the drug disposal training.
The drugs, so you just mix it up a little bit, seal it off, and then all you have to do is throw it in your household trash.
Attendees were provided with disposal kits and Narcan to take home. I'm Henry Chisholm, Capital Dispatch News. Thanks for listening to the show today, or watching it if you watched. And make sure you give our social media some love. Capital Dispatch on Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky, Threads, everywhere. Have a good one.